Hey, what's up, bro? Thanks so much for joining. Hey, Yog. Thanks so much for joining, Yog. I want to see some more of your projects. I want to know what you've been working on this week. I'm doing well. I'm excited about the collections we're releasing. I'm excited about the conversations I've been having. Today, we're going to be speaking with Kabeer Khurana, who's actually my cousin who lives in Mumbai, and he's also a director. We had the chance to meet. Hey, Bharat, how's it going? We had the chance to meet in December for the first time. Oh, thank you so much, Yog. That was a really exciting moment for us. That was a really big milestone. We were very excited to be able to share our story in GQ, and yeah, that means a lot. Thank you so much for the support, Yog. Thank you so much to everyone joining. Kabir is requesting now live.
Hey, what's
Hey,
up?
what's up, dude?
How
How's
are
your week?
you?
Good, good. How are you? You're looking good wearing Raga Man.
Yes, yeah, you can see the whole thing.
So, Kabir, it does make me really proud and happy to see you in Raga Man because you're a very accomplished director. And I really wanted, as part of my dream for Raga Man, to build a community of creatives. And for wearing Raga Man to be a symbol of that, that when you meet people who are connected to this brand, you know that you're meeting someone who is interested in creativity and art. And so it means the world to me that you're wearing Raga Man. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sending them over. I've been wearing them for the past 3 days, back to back. And everybody, like I mentioned to you an hour ago when we spoke, everybody I've been meeting over the past 2 3 days, has been complimenting me on the designs and the aesthetic and the look and the vibe. It's incredible. I really
That
thank you
that's
for
so
sending me all
awesome.
of this. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. And also, I wanted to briefly talk about how we met because we're cousins, we're family, but we really met for the first time in December. And we immediately, I feel like, did and had so much fun together being in
Oh yeah.
Mumbai. And like, I'm just so excited that we got to connect because I feel like we get to have some really interesting conversations. And now that's why I wanted you. I'm so happy you accepted the invitation to join because I thought our conversations are so fun and I wanted to bring the
Oh yeah.
rest of our community in. So I wanted to jump
Yeah.
right in and ask you, you know, you are a very accomplished director. How did you know, when was the point that you knew you wanted to be a creative, when you wanted to be a director?
I actually I was very fortunate to have grown up in an environment that fostered, this kind
Yeah.
of visual literacy, as it's called.
Yeah.
And so therefore, growing up, I always knew that this was my calling and this is what I wanted to do in my life. And so it wasn't a decision I made at any certain point. It was something that was a given. It was something that I always knew that
Right.
this is my calling and this is really what I want to do.
So when you were a kid, were you doing creative projects? Would you make films around the house? Would you enroll your friends in films and
Yeah,
things like that? Yeah.
yeah. We made a bunch of trashy home videos.
Really?
A bunch of them. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I used to get my friends over, and almost every weekend we used to be shooting something. It started off with shooting on the webcam, and yeah. So obviously, it used to be constantly attached to the laptop. So there's limited mobility, and the angles obviously that you can shoot
Right.
are also limited. So yeah, it started off. Then of course, a little more professional. So I had a friend who had a camera, and we started shooting on that. But again, those were films that I made, I think, in the fifth, sixth grade, and they were pretty bad, very embarrassing when I look at them now.
I do think though, if you're in a creative field, I think that you have to be bad to be good. And that ends up stopping a lot of people because they think that they get nervous or embarrassed about what they're putting out. I mean, even when I look at some of the stuff I put out for our brand 3 years ago, like I think like, okay, that's not really like I'm happy I've grown from there.
Yeah.
but you kind of have to. Do you agree? You do have to go through that process, or do you think there are some overnight prodigies who just are born perfect?
No, I frankly, I do not believe in the concept of prodigy or genius or anything like that. I think it's
Yeah,
always a process, where you learn and you grow and you keep getting better. And everybody has to go through that. Nobody's really born
yeah.
with inborn talent and inborn abilities. It's always, it's a journey that you pick up certain, you pick up certain skills as you go along, and uh, you make yourself competent.
So, okay, you grew up in a family of artists, directors, filmmakers. So it sounds like it was in the blood, it was in the air, but you still have to know you're talented and that you can do the job because you can't, just because you grew up in that environment doesn't mean you can make a living doing it or that you are able to do that same thing. So how did you know that you're going to commit yourself to this and that this is really something of professional interest? Was there a jump between making home movies and saying this is my profession and I'm going to take it seriously?
No, like I said, this is something I always knew I wanted to do professionally, right since I was a kid. So it was always, obviously, I always knew that, with even with the home videos I was making, I always
Yeah,
knew that I was trying to, with every project I was trying to, get better and take it a notch higher.
yeah.
So that was something I was always doing. I was always striving to become a professional at some point. And
So
yeah, sorry.
who would you say are your who are your biggest artistic influences? Who were sort of some of your role models growing up as filmmakers?
So frankly, I grew up on a lot of animation. I grew
Yeah.
up on a lot of. I think most of us did actually,
Hmm.
but I grew up on a lot of Disney and DreamWorks, and yeah. So I grew up on that. But apart from, of course, though that's considered commercial content, but I also grew up with a lot of. I grew up watching a lot of avant-garde and a lot of experimental stuff as well, right? From the National Film Board of Canada, from Films Division. So yeah, a bunch of short films that I used to watch, and I grew up watching, and obviously those obviously became inspiration for me in the films I finally made.
So, what do you think in terms of when you're making a film? What, what would you say are the ideas that influence what the content you create? So, for example, I feel like every director that I watch has some sort of signature. Like if I'm watching Martin
Right,
Scorsese, I can tell that it's a Martin Scorsese film. If I'm watching
absolutely.
Francis Ford Coppola, I'm just curious, like to get to your point of view, how did you get to your point of view, and what do you feel like are the elements of your storytelling?
Well, I'm still in that process of self-discovery. Very frankly, I'm still trying to find my signature and my style. So I don't really have one at this point, but it's getting there. But you're right. I mean, a film is essentially an extension of a person's thinking, right?
Yeah.
And their worldview and their whole raison d'être, or their whole philosophy and their politics, and all of that plays out in the kinds of films that they make. So you're right when you say that. But as for me, I haven't really found my signature yet. I'm still on my way of finding it. I guess in a few years you'll be able to tell. Okay, this is the film
This is
made
a
by
Kabeer
him, or
Khurana. Yeah.
I mean, whatever. I mean, I'm still trying to find that. I'm still trying to find that. Yes.
We had a photographer and art director on here a couple weeks ago who said that Picasso's work at the beginning of his life was different from his work at the end of his life, but it's still a Picasso. And
Right.
so there's something consistent in terms of the identity, and then there's something that's evolving and changing, and that makes work, look completely different from when someone started. So,
Absolutely.
how would you describe that evolution with an artist in terms of what is like how does that identity change but still stay the same person? How can a person grow while still being true to themselves?
Well, I think the key operative term here is maturity. I think every artist goes through a process where they mature, and as they mature, obviously their work has more layers and depth to it, right? So if you see any great artist, right, I mean, their initial work was uh, extremely formalist in a way,
Yeah.
and it kind of abstracted as they picked up experiences along the course of their lives, right? And they became more abstract, and they became more passionate brush strokes, or a lot of exuberance, a lot of color, a lot of energy. uh, or it could go the other way also, like it just mellowed and it became extremely subdued, right? So it can go either way, but whatever it is, the point is it starts when you're younger, you're still trying to pick up the skills, and therefore it starts off as being extremely formalist, and then it grows on to becoming more abstract, because now you know the rules, and now you're trying to break them.
Yeah, right. So do you feel like your work is a reflection of, like, does your work change with whatever's going on in your personal life? What's the connection between your personal identity and the identity of your work?
Well, I don't think any great piece of art can anyway be created without the heartfelt pain of the creator. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the truth, right?
Yeah.
And therefore your work has to be personal. Your work has to come from what you're really feeling, and obviously from a certain kind of mindset, certain kind of worldview that you're experiencing at that moment in your life, right?
So it can be kind of scary for people to get honest with themselves. And then it's even scarier to be vulnerable and to share it. Is that something that you always had? Or is there a way that people, let's say in our community, could cultivate that skill?
Well, I think being self-expressed is the most important thing for an artist. Uh, it is something that has to be cultivated, because I think with a largely with the male population in this world, I think it's a crime being vulnerable, right?
Yeah, right.
It's the men are conditioned to be strong and independent, and to kind of conceal their emotions and not let themselves loose.
Yeah.
So and a lot of women also are like that, where they're not men and women both actually are not as self-expressed or open. And that is something that has to be cultivated, because people are conditioned a certain way. As for me, I was never told not to cry, or not to feel, or not to express what I was feeling at that point. And therefore I was able to kind of even for me to tell people how I'm feeling, I was never embarrassed, and to even portray that expression in my art was something that I could do very easily.
Did you ever have any hesitation? Have you ever had hesitation expressing your truth because of a desire to conform, or maybe not to offend or hurt the people around you?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something that I think I was always someone who was always I always took a step back from the world, right? I was not someone who was too interested in becoming a character in my own story, in a way. I always wanted to be the writer who's standing at the back and watching the party. And therefore I was able to detach myself from what people thought of me, or what they would think of me if I portrayed a version of them in my art, right? It didn't matter.
Yeah.
I would create as per what I saw and what I felt, and it didn't matter if it offended someone or didn't offend someone, or what somebody felt about what I portrayed them as, because I was able to detach myself
I
from
think
from
one of
this
the
whole
biggest,
madness of it.
yeah, I think, right. I think one of the biggest fears that people have is of loneliness and isolation. And that really gets in the way of people being able to express who they are and speak their truth, because if they do say what they feel in that moment, they're going to offend someone, they're going to hurt someone, they're going to isolate themselves. how do you deal with that fear, or do you have that fear at all?
No, I don't have that fear. Not now. I used to earlier, a few years
Hmm.
ago, but I think right now in the space that I am in, I don't know. I've been uh, floating a little afar
Yeah.
from the world and just observing as a distant observer,
Yeah.
taking the
So
observational vantage.
yeah. And so do you feel like that if there's somebody, if you were to give sort of some advice on how to be honest with yourself, um, how to like cut through the BS of the stories and narratives you tell yourself to keep yourself from going into this dark abyss of who am I outside of the narrative of other people telling me who I am? What's some method? I'll start with what like I needed to do. So I uh, I wrote, I wrote that poetry book in between assignments, and that was really an exercise for me in untangling the assumptions that I had made about life and the narratives that other people had imposed on me. And I wanted to try to observe life as though no one told me anything. And, I'm not saying that I achieved that in any perfect sense, but just writing and playing with my ideas and turning every idea that I had been told upside down to explore it, that was the way that I was able to untangle myself from the other narratives, and I could start getting honest about what I really felt. And I feel like even today, it helps me to think of an idea and then express it in some way and let people have at it, let people attack me or like it or whatever. And even that process of just putting it out there lets me know if that's really me or not. Sometimes I put something out there and I think that's not even me, and like people are kind of judging it or evaluating it and reviewing it, and then I put it out and then I think, ooh, that maybe that wasn't so much me, let me try again. So
Yeah.
that process of like creating and expressing, like just creating in isolation, I feel like doesn't help me get to know myself better. Creating and expressing and the feedback from people feels like gives me the opportunity to be brave. And that opportunity is what lets me get to know myself. So
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know if there's
absolutely.
some process that you go through to get honest.
Well, yeah, I mean, I completely agree. No piece of art can be created without honesty and integrity, right? And therefore, I think Ernest Hemingway puts it very appropriately. He says, "Writing is easy. The only way you can write is by putting pen to paper and let yourself bleed."
Yeah,
Right.
right.
So you just do that. You let yourself bleed,
Yeah,
and when you bleed, it's not a cerebral process. It's more of an emotional process.
yeah.
And when you let your heart out and then you let your soul out, I think that's the highest level of honesty you can achieve.
So here's what I feel like feels like sort of a paradox for people who are in pursuit of this independent, authentic self, is that for me it also is tied to other people. Like I can create something that feels honest for myself, but then I have this desire that I also want other people to see it. But part of my narrative is like, well, I don't really care what other people think, but then why am I sharing it? Like, don't I do hope to connect in some way, and I do hope to either change other people or be changed by them. And I do have to wonder sometimes where that comes from. That like there is this desire to create and then a desire to share. And it's not that I don't care what other people think, because otherwise I wouldn't be putting something out there. I'm putting it out to be consumed. I must care a lot about people because I'm putting work out for them to receive it. It's not just for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's a paradox that every filmmaker goes through as well, right? Like,
Yeah,
are you
that's
making
what
a
I
film
mean.
for
Like,
yourself? Are
yeah,
you making a film for yourself? Are you making a film for an audience?
yeah, that's my
Right?
question. That's my
Yeah,
question.
yeah, yeah. I don't know how to achieve. I think it has to be a gentle balance of the two. Whether you're
Yeah,
making a film for yourself or making a film for the audience. As for me, some of my films are for myself, some of the films are for an audience. If I'm making a film for a client, then it's for an audience. If I'm making a film for my passion project, then it's for myself. It's very clear.
It's
But
for
it's not to say
yourself,
that.
but other
But
people,
yeah, I
but
mean,
you're making it for other people to watch.
yeah, exactly. So then, yeah, so then the only way to achieve that is you keep it personal, but
Yeah.
you also keep it engaging.
Yeah.
So that people who are watching it, at least they know they're engaged in what you're saying, but you're still being true to yourself, where you're telling the story you want to tell.
Yeah. I think like when I watch your films, I watched your film on Dali, and my feeling when I watched that was this person, like I get to see the world through your eyes for those few minutes, and I get to add your imagination to my consciousness. And so I feel like that's the benefit I get of you sharing your art with me, is that it's revealed to me more that I'm limited in my thinking. But all of us has this larger collective, we all have this consciousness that we're not aware of. Like, I don't really know how you see the world, but when I get to see the world the way you see the world, it changes how I see the world. And I kind
Yeah,
of feel that I don't know if that's part of the motivation for you, but for me, I know, like for us with Raga, one of my goals is I want people to see the beauty of multicultural inclusivity. And that becomes the story. That's the story I'm telling. And I'm trying to bring that more into the world. Like, I'm trying to bring my worldview into the world more so that other people see what I'm seeing. And I don't know, is that part of the vision for you? Like when you're, for example, the Dali film, I'm watching this story about artists, but I'm watching it in the form of dance. And I had to imagine, like, well, maybe this is how you are seeing the world. This is how you're seeing, um, like there is a way to see this world in an even more beautiful way.
yeah. I mean, you're right. The point of art is, the whole purpose of art is obviously to exchange ideas
Yeah.
and to obviously, an artist's job is obviously to, apart from being that I wanted to create this whole kind of lyrical poetry in motion, right? And this whole immersive experience where people come in from another world and they get into your world and they see, for these mesmerizing whatever 10 minutes of screen time, they get into this other very different kind of surreal universe,
Yeah.
right? And then they're done with the film, they walk out of the film, and I hope it leaves a lasting impact
Yeah.
where that feeling, that emotion stays with them. It's an emotion. It's an
Yeah.
emotion. It's not something that's cerebral. That's not something that's high concept or something
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very, political or philosophical or deals with some great idea. It's primarily a feeling. It's an emotion. So you feel it or you don't feel it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like watching your films lets me, for me, what it does for me is it reminds me of how surreal this experience actually is. Like, it's so easy to normalize and become desensitized to the magic in the world. Um, and a lot of times when I feel like I'm watching your films, it reminds me that there is a surreal element to what we're living. We just forget.
Yeah.
And it gives me a lot of hope, and it gives me a lot of motivation um, to do things that bring that, to be a part of that way of life that makes life more beautiful. um, I do want to know, so you're in a family of artists. Do you feel like you're able to kind of inspire each other or work together in some ways? Are the dinner table conversations about art, like what is that life like? Because a lot of people would be unfamiliar with that.
I don't know. I guess we all encourage each other. I
Yeah.
mean, most definitely. And yes, of course, most of the dinner table conversations are extremely creative.
Yeah.
They are very enriching in a way. And mostly, either it's me bouncing off ideas of my mom and dad, or them bouncing ideas off each other. Uh, so yeah, we're all giving feedback to each other on each other's ideas, and
Yeah.
you know, because frankly, there's no such thing as a bad story.
Yeah.
There's only bad storytelling. So it's the way you. It's not. Of course, your stories have to be personal, but the way
Yeah.
it's told is what makes it a good film or a bad film. Right?
Yeah.
It's the way it's told. It's never the story. It's never the idea. It's never the theme. It's never the concept. It's always the way it's told that actually leaves a lasting impact or doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, how do you feel like one thing that you mentioned was that people in your life might end up in your work, and that's just kind of part of being your friend or part of being in your life is that you're being, you're observing what is happening, what people are doing, and so how does a person create that level of mindfulness and presence? Because I feel like most of us are just running around from task to task, but like you said, being an observer, um, how do you cultivate that patience, or is that just something that you've had?
Well, the idea is to not be a character in your own story, like I said.
Hmm.
Right? You can't be a character in your own story and expect to be an artist. You have to take a step back and be an observer, no matter how involved you may get with the interactions and relationships you have around you. You still must know that at the end of the day, you're a writer, and therefore, as a writer, you need to be able to study the people around you to write characters. Right? And the inspiration you get for your characters, obviously, from the people and the people you interact with, all the people around you in your environment. So therefore, being you're right. It is difficult to kind of immerse yourself in this world and in the journey of life.
Hmm.
Yet be take an observational vantage. Yes, it is a little difficult. But if you really want to be a good storyteller, then you need to be able to study characters. You need to be able to study human beings to write them into your stories. You can't be a character in your own story. You need to be the writer, right at the back of the party, just watching, this whole party come to life, or the madness that is taking place in this world.
Wow. So, what could I ask you? Like, what are your since you are a student of human behavior? What are your? We're living through a very chaotic time. Do you have any observations on human nature and human beings that you could share, just about what you think people want? And I know maybe it's not so universal, but um, like, do you feel like when you're meeting and speaking with people, you can understand the motivation and where it's coming from, even if you don't agree with it?
Well, like you said, I mean, it's difficult to make a general assessment. Right? I don't know. I don't know what people want. I mean, definitely, it has affected everybody, but
Yeah,
it's affected people in different ways.
yeah,
Right? So I know friends who had plans to go abroad. I had friends who I know who had all kinds of plans. They were getting a new job. They were graduating. Somebody else was planning to move out. Things like that, and all those plans were squashed in this one. In this one
yeah,
whole 15 span, where this whole uh, you know this whole virus came in out of nowhere almost.
yeah,
So no, I can't make a general assessment on what people motivations are. I'm not a I'm not
yeah,
a psychology student. I cannot read minds. I don't think psychologists can read minds either.
yeah,
But
yeah,
anyway, the point is, I attempt. I try to I try to when I'm speaking to them, I'm trying to constantly understand their inner monologues and
yeah.
their inner
Because
dialogue. I mean, the
you're
whole
writing
thing is,
characters, like
yeah, yeah.
you're writing characters, so you are making some attempt at understanding why people want to do things. Like, I've heard this
Oh yeah,
quote, which is,
and
all of man's problems come from not being able to sit in a room idle. And I think that the question is like, why do we do the things that we do?
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
the thing is, when you're writing characters, and being one of the things about being a storyteller is that the moment you understand human beings to the level that is required, you can't really blame them. It becomes impossible to blame them for their actions because you see where they're coming from, and therefore
Yeah.
you're not sitting in a position of judgment. You're sitting in a position of understanding, right?
Yeah.
So there's no right and wrong. Then there's no black and white. Everybody is a shade of gray, and everybody has reason for behaving the way they are. It doesn't matter if they're a murderer or they're a criminal and they've done whatever they've done. It's maybe because of their conditioning, or because of some situation or something else.
Yeah.
So you become a sort of a moral non-absolutist in a way.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So
Yeah.
it's harder than to judge people, and it must look sort of absurd when you see other people judging other people as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, see, exactly. So when this whole thing about right, wrong, good, bad, it becomes very impossible because you get into the head of the character and you see, or the head of the person who's behaving this way, and you see
Yeah.
their truth, you see their world, and you understand that if you were there, you would be the way they are. You would
Yeah.
be there. You would live that truth. So it therefore
Yeah. Yeah.
becomes extremely difficult for me as a storyteller to take a stand on anything. Of
Yeah.
course, now I started to take stands. The fact of the matter is, if you get so much into this character and so much that you see in their eyes.
Kabir, you just cut out for a moment. Let me see if I can get you back on here. Kabir, can you hear me?
Can you see me?
Okay, now you're back.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
awesome.
Okay. Good.
Um,
Yeah.
okay, so
Sorry. Were
actually
you listening?
that leads to a question that we have from our audience here. Raheem is asking, do you ever feel motivated? You were talking earlier about being detached from the story. Do you ever feel motivated to jump into the story?
Oh yeah. I mean, it has to be a play of both, right? You can't. If you're a distant observer, then you don't have any emotions for the world that you're writing, right? It's only when you get immersed in the world and in the madness of interactions and relationships that you actually feel that pain, right?
Right, right.
So the whole building the world is a process of it's a process where you have to take an observational advantage, but you have to involve yourself in the world if you have to write with a certain amount of pain, and if your story has to be heartfelt, then you have to experience the emotion of that experience, or that situation or the circumstance or whatever, right? So it has
Yeah,
to be a balance of being a rationalist, where you're understanding people's worldviews and therefore taking a step back, right? And taking a step in,
right,
you want to understand the emotion of that experience. There has to be a balance of both.
right. It almost sounds like what you're
Stepping
describing
in.
is like being like a deep sea diver.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a process of
Oh,
stepping
sorry.
in and stepping out of the world. It's a process of stepping in and
Yeah,
stepping
right.
out of the world. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
games you
So
have to play with yourself.
yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like the Matrix, right? Where you like
Oh yeah,
plug yourself in, and then you're like, okay, now I'm gonna believe this is real for a while, and then you plug yourself out, and then write down your observations. Like,
yeah, yeah.
interesting,
Absolutely.
interesting.
That's
That
what.
made me angry, sad, jealous. Like all these different emotions. But then you're taking a step back, saying, okay, but those are not part of me. That's what I experienced as a human being.
Oh
Okay, let
yeah,
me jump back
absolutely.
in and let me jump back in and get hurt more so that I can come back and make something. So does art rely on pain, or is there another source of energy that it can come from?
Art does not always rely on pain. There are expressionists who relied on pain, and therefore, and their art only came from their heart, I would say. But art can also come from a cerebral level, right? It can come from a process of questioning, right?
Yeah.
Questioning the world around you and questioning the boundaries of art itself, right?
Yeah.
So obviously these are the modernists or the postmodernists. Modern art movement came from a process of questioning, while the expressionism and impressionism, both movements, came from a process of feeling.
Yeah. Do you feel like, okay, so it's one thing to feel like a detached observer, but I do feel like you have a strong point of view when it comes to politics, um, or social issues. So in some senses, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when you have a strong point of view, do you feel like your art can be used to change people's minds? And is that a consideration for you? Is that a motivation?
Well, yes. The fact of the matter is that no matter how much you try, all good pieces of art have an agenda behind it,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And therefore, I have personally made my agenda. Apart, of course, I do make films which are general, which are just general personal experiences or drawn from general emotions of mine. But there are some films that I also choose to make, which push forward my personal agenda which is kind of a socialist agenda of general ideas of equality, liberty, freedom, and justice.
Right. Right.
Right?
So
And
then in that
sorry.
sense, you're not detached. In that sense, you're not the detached observer. You are really getting in the mix. You're getting in the arena. Am I right? Or is that not the way you'd see it?
Well, I am getting in the arena, but not all the time.
Yeah, right. It's sort of
Because
the
the idea is to be genre agnostic. The
yeah,
idea is to understand that even though there is that equality and justice and liberty are your personal values, that is your truth.
yeah,
And there are multiple truths in this world.
yeah,
And just the way you have an agenda and this is your stand, the other side has their stand too, and that's
yeah,
their truth. And they're not wrong if you see it from their perspective. And if you were where they are and you've been brought up in their environment, then you would think like them too.
right.
So therefore there are no absolutes in this world. So no
Yeah,
matter what you may say, and you may really stand your ground and really speak with the most amount of conviction about your ideals and your ideas, the fact of the matter is that that's your truth, that's
yeah,
your agenda.
yeah,
That is not the absolute truth. And do not make your agenda a goddamn religion.
yeah,
Do not make it your religion. Understand that yes, of course, equality, justice, all these values are important for a progressive world. But keep in mind that when religion started, when the birth of Christianity and Islam and Hinduism and all the other religions, what they were the ideas that they were propagating, they thought were necessary to for the progress of mankind,
right.
and they imposed these ideas at the butt end of a gun.
Yeah,
But what do you have? I mean, what do you have today? All of these religions, most of them have become corrupt, bigoted,
yeah,
extremely regressive. So understand this is the truth of the time, but they may not necessarily be the truth 10 years, 20 years down the line, right? The truth is also constantly changing, and therefore to have any kind of ideological pre-commitments something that I always steer away from as far as possible.
What do you think is to go sort of along the lines of addressing sort of the social fabric in different countries? Like India and America, I would say, share a very diverse, share an aspect of their society, which is that both societies are diverse. They're built on concepts of secularism. They're built on concepts of multiculturalism. What do you think is the way forward for these kinds of societies that are made up of different people with different worldviews, different points of view, often conflicting points of view? Do you think there is a way to tie these worlds together and build? Yeah.
Well, there are only two ways. One is obviously education,
Yeah.
right, which is of primary importance.
Yeah.
And when I mean education, I mean the right kind of education. I mean education in the humanities, right? So as to make people more aware of the society around them, to make people more politically aware, and to make people aware of really how conflict originates and how conflict can be resolved, in a way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That is, I think, one. And the second is, I think in India at least, I feel like somewhere there's an impasse, right, where you have these communities, these two warring religious communities in India, and they're not willing to have a dialogue. They're not willing to have a conversation with each other. So they need to just sit down across the table and have a dialogue, and that's it. They'll achieve some peace.
Yeah. You know, I've noticed for myself, I think that film has a very powerful role to play in creating empathy and also in addressing people's own behavior. I can't tell you the number of times I've watched a film and seen someone do something, being egotistical, doing something bad, and watching that film and recognizing that behavior in myself and thinking, wow, I don't want to be that guy. And it has this almost like looking at yourself in the mirror has a self-correcting impact. Because when something is like, I mean, it's even in much smaller ways, when I'm recording myself doing something, talking about our products or telling a story, I sometimes look back and say, oh, I want to do that better. And even when I watch films and they're characters that aren't me, when I see myself in a character, oftentimes I will see a behavior that I would condemn and think is bad. And then something inside me says, wait a second, you have that in you. And then it's like, okay, I need to correct that. And so I think like film has the impact of being a mirror to show how sort of small-minded we can be. And I've noticed that quality in your films is when I've seen I'm forgetting the name of the film that I saw, but it was one that you won an award for with some really brilliant actors about the tea shop.
Tea shop. Which one are you talking about?
Maybe it was an older actor, and then there was a younger person who came in. And
right, Karma Cafe. Yes, Karma Cafe.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I feel like we can all sort of watch that and we can see ourselves in that character who's going through a moral dilemma. And we it gives us the chance to work out a problem without having to completely create a lot of destruction in our lives. You know, we can kind of, through art, explore the darkness within us without having that darkness just completely hurt people in our lives, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And which is why, like I said earlier, which is why it's important for every filmmaker to understand human beings to the extent where they're able to write characters that are authentic.
Yeah.
Right. And that becomes critically important.
Yeah.
Right. So that people when they're watching a film, they can see themselves in the characters that they're watching.
Yeah.
they can see themselves and they can relate to those characters, and when they relate to those characters, that automatically instills some change, because they know that this character is and the character of the trajectory that the character is going through in the film can possibly be their trajectory as well.
Yeah.
That if this character who's going through this experience in the film, whatever the journey is of the
Right.
character, whatever the arc of the character is in the film,
Yeah.
if it's downfall, then they know, then the audience obviously of that, the audience that can see themselves in that specific character knows that, if they continue to go along the way that they're going in this, in this direction, then it can possibly be their fate as well. So, and that is actually the one that psychologically maybe changes mindsets,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really fascinated now by what you've been talking about, the detachment versus change impact of art in film. Because on one hand, I noticed there are filmmakers whose signature is sort of to leave you with an open-ended, um, without a conclusion and within a
Yeah.
way of thinking. And then there are others who sort of walk you down the road of this will be your
Yeah.
if you go down this road. So it's more of a cautionary tale, or there is.
Yeah.
Um, do you feel like you fall on either end of that spectrum, or do you feel like there's both? It just depends on the
There's
piece.
both. So there are pieces of work where I will just capture life as it is without taking a stand on what is right and wrong, or without berating my protagonist for his bad actions, or without kind of eulogizing him for all of his good actions.
Yeah.
I may just let him be, and just capture life as it is and capture life as we see it without taking a moral stand. Right, and there may be other films where I may do the opposite, where I may take a moral stand and say, okay, no, if you do this, this is the result, and this is the consequence that you'll have to pay.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then these are the consequences of that. So right. It's I don't know where I lie as of now. I mean, it's all as per my mood, and it's all as per my it's about, I think it's all as per what I'm feeling at that moment. If I'm feeling very politically aggressive, then I will take an absolute stand and say, no, this is wrong. Right. But if at that moment I feel like I'm in a more nihilistic space, if I'm floating above the world, then I may just leave it, and say, okay, this is life. You take a stand what you think is right and wrong, and I leave it up to the audience.
Yeah. Are there other forms of art that you engage with that are not film related that help you unlock your own sense of creativity, whether it's sketching or anything like that?
Yeah, I do sketch a lot. I sketch a lot. I play the violin.
Oh, wow. I actually didn't.
Yeah, I play the violin. I sketch a lot. I write a lot of essays. I write a lot of poetry.
Yeah. Is there some place where, I mean, do you share that as well publicly? Like that art, your music or poetry?
Poetry, I have a private blog, but I'm not going to share the link because that's only for myself. Like you said earlier. Yeah. Like you said earlier. Yeah. Yes, you do create art for yourself, which you don't want to share with the world. So that also exists. And yes, my sketches and all of this I post on my Instagram.
You also have, you've launched a company. So you're an artist, but you're also an entrepreneur called X. Yeah. And I wanted to know how you balance the art and business aspects together, which I think can be very difficult for many people to find that balance. How do you balance those two different elements in a business, in a creative business?
Oh, well, actually, I frankly have a very good partner.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. And he manages the whole business aspect of things. I have little or no idea of how business administration really runs. I need to know it. I know that understanding some aspects of business is important for everyone. And I have obviously run a few organizations before this as well. But the specifics of equity and revenue share and, profit margins and all of that jazz is something that I don't, and drawing up contracts and client servicing and all that is something that is not my cup of tea. It's not my interest.
Yeah.
And I don't get into it. I just look into the projects. I look at, delivering the best project as, as I can to the clients, and that's my focus. And I leave the rest up to Rohan, who's my partner, and he's fabulous. He really knows what he's doing.
Do you believe in visualization, or in terms of goal setting? There are a lot of people, for example, in our Raga Man community who are creators and who have milestones and goals that they want to achieve. Is that a part of your journey? Is that a part of what you do, is setting goals for yourself in terms of where you want to be in the future? Or are you just thinking about the present moment right now, or some combination?
No, I don't. I don't set goals. No,
Okay,
I don't set goals. I don't set goals. I do what I love at the moment, and I think the rest. And obviously, I put my heart and soul into everything I do, and I completely live in the present. I don't. I try not to live in the past. I can't say I succeed at that,
Yeah.
but yeah, I completely try and live in the present, and I don't think about the future or the past. I just give the present 100%.
Kabeer, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share with our audience?
No, you tell me. I think we've spoken a lot of. I think I've shared a lot of my inner monologue, a lot of my philosophy, personal philosophy with you on this conversation. So yeah, it was fun.
Good. I hope that who joined in also had a lot of. If you want to follow up with Kabeer, I know you have an Instagram with exposition pictures.
Yeah.
And we're always in touch. So if you shoot me a message, want me to ask or anything, we have a lot of fun. I can't wait to see you again in Mumbai, where we can walk the streets aimlessly and philosophy and go down all kinds of rabbit holes. That is seriously, that was one of my favorite nights I've had ever in India, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to have you back again in Mumbai. It was great fun, when you were here. I still remember, we were at Cart Road and we were talking all kinds of shit, bro. Yeah. All kinds of shit about the world.
Yeah.
It's good fun.
For a cigarette.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which exciting. We had really a lot of fun, and I can't wait to do it again. Also, I want to let everybody know that at 7 p.m. this evening, there's going to be a meditation and live concert on Shop Raga, on our Shop Raga account, the women's account. So tune into that. Kabeer, thank you so much for joining, and I'll give you a call soon.
Thank you for having me, man.
All right.
Cheers.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.